She lost, braced for death, when a human arrow hissed past her ear and dropped the champion Lifles that Sarak had long been known as the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. Their planet, surrounded by swirling storm clouds and endless skies, had birthed an entire civilization based on combat, strength, and survival. It was here in the heart of their sacred arena where the greatest battles were fought. The Tsarak Queen, known for her undefeated record, stood tall and proud at the center of it all. Clad in armor forged from the toughest metal in the galaxy, her movements were swift and calculated, her eyes filled with an unshakable confidence. Today, however, something unusual was about to happen. In the midst of the vibrant, alien-filled Colosseum, a lone human stood, facing the Queen. He was a fighter, but unlike the Tsarak, he had not been trained his whole life to dominate in the arena. His name was Marcus, and he was no mere soldier. His human resolve, however, was something that Tsarak Queen had never encountered. The crowd fell silent as the two opponents locked eyes, the tension thick in the air. Marcus could feel his heart racing, his breath coming in short bursts. The sound of the arena was deafening, the murmurs of the alien spectators like distant thunder, but it all seemed to fade away as he focused entirely on the task ahead. To him, this wasn't just a battle. It was his chance to prove humanity's worth. As the Queen raised her weapon, a large, gleaming blade that shimmered in the twin suns overhead, Marcus shifted his weight. He had studied the Tsarak for weeks before coming to this moment. He knew their techniques, their strengths, and their weaknesses. Despite the Queen's terrifying power, Marcus believed he had an advantage. He had the element of surprise. The signal was given. The Queen charged with the grace of a predator, her movements so fluid they almost seemed unnatural. She swung her blade with terrifying speed, aiming to decapitate Marcus in a single strike. But he was ready. With a quick sidestep, Marcus avoided the attack, the blade passing so close to his skin that he could feel the rush of air as it sliced through the space where his neck had been only a moment before. He wasn't fast enough to land a counterstrike, but he had bought himself some time. The Queen's eyes narrowed, the faintest hint of surprise flickering behind her otherwise stoic gaze. She wasn't used to being outmaneuvered. Marcus didn't waste a second. His hand reached for the bow at his side, a simple weapon by the standards of the Tsarak, but one he had honed his skills with for years. He notched an arrow, his fingers trembling as he aimed for the Queen's unguarded flank. In a fluid motion, he loosed the arrow, but the Queen was already moving, her reflexes so sharp that the missile barely grazed her armor. The crowd roared in approval at the exchange. They had never seen a human move like this before. The Tsarak were used to facing other warriors, but the human had something different. A tenacity, a will to survive, and a mind that worked in ways that Tsarak could not predict. The Queen struck again, this time with a series of rapid blows aimed at Marcus's chest. He ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding each strike. He knew he couldn't match her strength, but he didn't need to. His strategy was simple: outlast her, confuse her, find a weakness. As the Queen advanced, Marcus could see her resolve hardening. She was a warrior who had never been bested, and she did not take defeat lightly. Her pride burned fiercely, fueling her attacks as she closed the distance. Marcus, already exhausted from dodging and weaving, knew that he had only moments before the Queen would bring the full weight of her fury down upon him. He quickly glanced at the crowd of aliens, watching from every corner of the arena. They were silent now, captivated by the human's resilience. Their eyes were not filled with disdain as they had been when he first entered the arena. They were watching a battle, but they were also witnessing something new. They were witnessing a fight not just of strength, but of will. The Queen's next attack came with a brutal overhead strike, aiming to cleave Marcus in half. He could feel the air shift as her blade descended with unimaginable speed. This time, he didn't dodge. Instead, he stepped into the blow, using his own weight to push the Queen off balance. The impact reverberated through his body, but he managed to land a quick jab with his dagger, aiming for a chink in her armor. The Queen staggered, a rare crack in her defenses. Her gaze flickered down to the small wound, and for the briefest moment, Marcus saw something in her eyes: frustration. The Queen had never faced an opponent like this, one who didn't fear her, one who didn't see her as unbeatable. The crowd shifted, murmurs of disbelief rising from the stands. Was this human really capable of defeating their Queen? Marcus knew he couldn't rely on luck forever. He needed to end this fight on his terms. His hand instinctively reached for another arrow, but this time he didn't draw his bow. Instead, he looked up at the sky, his mind working quickly. There had to be a way to outsmart her. The human mind had always been its greatest weapon. As the queen readied herself for another strike, Marcus took a deep breath and did something he had never planned to do. He made a sacrifice. He turned his back to the queen, feigning weakness as if he had given up. The queen hesitated. It was a brief hesitation, but in that moment she made a fatal mistake. Marcus knew that if he was to survive this challenge, he needed to give her something she didn't expect. With all the strength he had left, he spun around, his bow raised high. The queen, caught off guard, was too slow to react. The arrow flew. The arrow flew through the air, its sharp point cutting the wind. Time seemed to slow as Marcus watched, breath held, every muscle in his body tensed. The queen, still in the midst of preparing for her next attack, turned just in time to see the glint of the arrow's flight. Her eyes widened, but it was too late. The arrow struck its mark. For a moment, there was only the sound of the queen's breath, and then the unmistakable sound of metal meeting flesh. The queen staggered back, her chest heaving as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. She reached for the arrow, but her hand trembled as it hovered just above it, unable to touch it. The blood began to flow, darkening the metal of her armor. She looked down in disbelief, her perfect, unblemished armor now stained, her pride shattered. Marcus didn't waste any time. His moment of advantage was fleeting. With the queen momentarily stunned, he forced his body to move, each movement more painful than the last. His heart raced in his chest as he fought to stay on his feet. The pain in his leg from the earlier wound was unbearable, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving that humans had a place in this vast, ruthless universe. He had to keep moving. The crowd, which had fallen silent during the queen's sudden falter, began to murmur. They couldn't believe their eyes. No one had ever landed a hit on the queen like this, let alone wounded her. She was supposed to be invincible, an unstoppable force of nature. But the human Marcus had done what no one thought possible. The queen gritted her teeth, her face twisted in fury. She had been knocked off balance, but she was far from finished. She stood straighter, and the cold glint in her eyes returned. Slowly, she drew herself up to her full height, ignoring the blood that seeped from the wound in her side. "You've made a grave mistake," she growled. Her voice was low and filled with venom, a sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. She raised her weapon again, her hands steady despite the injury. The crowd fell deathly quiet, all eyes locked on the two combatants. Marcus knew the fight wasn't over yet. The queen had been wounded, but she was still a formidable opponent. He could see the rage in her eyes, the overwhelming desire to crush him, to prove that she was still the dominant force in this arena. He could feel the pressure of the moment mounting. He had landed a hit, yes, but the real test was how he would follow it up. The queen moved first, her blade a blur as it slashed toward him. Marcus ducked, barely avoiding the deadly arc of the strike. He scrambled backward, his feet slipping on the blood-slicked ground. He couldn't let her get close again. Her strength was overwhelming, and if she landed another hit, there was no chance he would survive. His hand gripped his bow again, but he didn't have time to notch another arrow. The queen was already on him, faster than he had expected, her blade coming down in a vicious strike aimed at his head. He could hear the air whistling as the blade descended. There was no time to dodge. In a desperate move, Marcus threw himself to the side, the tip of the blade grazing his arm as he rolled across the arena floor. Pain flared up his side, but he gritted his teeth and ignored it. His life depended on keeping his wits sharp, staying focused on the fight, no matter how much his body begged him to stop. The queen was already advancing again, her steps heavy and relentless. She was angry now, each strike coming faster than the last. Marcus's mind raced as he looked for an opening, any weakness he could exploit. But the queen was too skilled, too precise. Her every movement was calculated, each step a threat to his life. For a moment, Marcus thought back to the training he had endured. It wasn't like the Tsarak's combat training. He hadn't been taught to fight in an arena or to fight with the same lethal precision. But he had been trained to survive, to think on his feet. He wasn't going to defeat the queen through sheer force. That was something he had learned early on. He had to outsmart her, find her blind spots, use the arena itself to his advantage. The ground beneath him was uneven, the dirt shifting with every movement. He could feel the weight of the battle, his body growing weaker by the second. Sweat stung his eyes and his breath came in ragged gasps. But in the distance, just beyond the queen's shadow, he saw something that made his heart race, an opening. It was brief, just a flash of opportunity, but it was there. The queen's blade was high, poised to strike once more. And Marcus, moving on pure instinct, did what he had to do. He lunged forward, his body screaming in protest, and grabbed the queen's arm. She roared in anger, twisting to shake him off, but Marcus had already made his move. With a grunt, he used the queen's momentum against her, throwing his weight into her, causing her to stumble forward. In that brief moment, her back was exposed to him. He reached for his bow again, his fingers slick with sweat and blood, and with everything he had left, he drew the string back. The bow creaked under the pressure as Marcus released the string, the arrow flying through the air. It hit its target, but not in the way he had hoped. The queen's armor was too thick, and the arrow bounced off with a dull thud. But Marcus wasn't deterred. He quickly reached for another arrow, drawing it with one hand as the queen spun around to face him. Her eyes locked on his, and for a brief second he saw something there, a flicker of respect. The queen wasn't just a warrior, she was a leader, a symbol of her people's might. And here in this arena she was facing something she had never encountered before. A human who wasn't just trying to survive, but who was fighting for a future. Marcus's next move was instinctive. With a final, desperate cry, he hurled himself at the queen, using his body to block her vision for just a split second. In that moment of chaos, he launched his final arrow. This time it struck true. The arrow pierced the queen's exposed throat, the tip of the shaft glinting in the twin sun's light before it lodged deep within her. The queen staggered, her hand flying to her throat as the blood spilled from the wound. The arena fell silent as she collapsed to the ground, her body trembling. Marcus stood, panting heavily, his vision swimming with exhaustion. He had done it. Against all odds, against a foe who should have been impossible to defeat, he had won. The crowd was still. Then slowly the sound of hushed whispers began to grow. Marcus didn't know what they were saying, but it didn't matter. He had survived. He had proven that humans were more than just weaklings in the eyes of the galaxy. They were warriors in their own right, with a spirit that couldn't be broken. And in that moment, Marcus realized that this victory was only the beginning. The universe had just seen the true strength of humanity. The arena fell into a heavy silence. The battle had taken a brutal turn, and Marcus could barely comprehend what had just happened. The queen, the legendary undefeated Sarek warrior, lay motionless on the ground, her once glowing eyes now dull. Her body, still adorned in her magnificent armor, seemed almost out of place on the dirt-streaked arena floor. The crowd, a mixture of alien species from every corner of the galaxy, was stunned into silence. No one had expected this. No one had thought a human could ever do what Marcus had just done, but Marcus didn't have time to celebrate. His breath came in ragged gasps, his legs buckling beneath him as his exhaustion caught up with him. His body ached from the strain, and the blood from his side wound continued to stain his clothing. His hand, shaking with every movement, gripped his bow as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He staggered toward the fallen queen, not sure what he was going to do. He knew he couldn't just stand there, not when the queen's supporters would likely turn on him. There was no way they would accept a human's victory over their champion. They had witnessed her defeat, and they would demand retribution. The alien spectators were starting to stir. Whispers began to ripple through the stands. Some were fearful, others were enraged. But none dared to make a move. They were still processing the impossible. Marcus, his vision swimming from the loss of blood and the overwhelming weight of what had just transpired, knew that it was only a matter of time before someone did. As the queen's blood continued to stain the arena floor, Marcus's eyes scanned the crowd. His mind raced, calculating, analyzing. He had to find a way out. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. If they rushed him now, he'd have no chance to defend himself. Even though he had defeated their greatest warrior, he knew that the crowd's rage was far more dangerous than any fight he had just faced. The queen's supporters, loyal and fierce, were beginning to gather. Their eyes glinted with murderous intent as they stared at Marcus. The muttering grew louder and the tension in the air became unbearable. The crowd was shifting, the first few spectators standing up, their hands reaching for weapons. They were not going to let the human leave this arena alive, but Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. He was too weak to run, too hurt to fight. All he could do was wait, His grip on his bow tightened, his fingers finding their place as he prepared himself for whatever came next. In the silence, his mind replayed the events, the incredible victory he had just achieved, but also the inevitable consequences that would follow. It was then that he heard it. A deep, rumbling voice cut through the tension, booming across the arena. Enough. The voice carried authority, and the crowd hesitated. Their attention shifted to the source of the command. Standing at the entrance to the arena, a figure emerged. It was an alien unlike any Marcus had seen before. Taller than any Tsarak, its body encased in ornate armor, the figure radiated an almost regal presence. Its skin shimmered with a strange iridescence, and its eyes, though not human, seemed to carry a deep intelligence, as though it had seen far more than anyone in the arena. This alien's voice echoed once more, commanding silence. "The fight is over," it said, "and the human has won." The alien's presence was like a force field. The crowd, once ready to tear Marcus apart, now fell back, their eyes wide in shock. The figure stepped forward, its movements calm and controlled. It walked past Marcus, its gaze momentarily meeting his. There was no threat in its eyes, only an unspoken understanding. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, unsure of what was happening. Was this a trick? Was this some sort of political maneuver to prevent violence? He couldn't be sure, but one thing was clear. This alien had the power to stop the chaos from erupting. For now, at least. The figure knelt beside the fallen queen, its hand hovering over her wound. Marcus could see the alien's expression shift, a flicker of respect crossing its face. It spoke softly, but Marcus couldn't hear the words. Whatever it was, the alien had recognized something in the queen's defeat, something profound. Without another word, the alien turned back toward the crowd, raising its hand in a commanding gesture. The arena fell into silence once more. The alien's eyes swept over the onlookers, its voice cold but filled with undeniable authority. The Tsarak queen has fallen. And with her death, a new order begins. This human, Marcus, has earned the right to speak. He is no longer an outcast. A murmur rippled through the crowd, but the alien's gaze silenced any objections before they could grow. It was clear this was no ordinary being. Its words held weight, and the spectators, now unsure of what was happening, remained still, watching with bated breath. Marcus was no longer sure what to think. He had come here to fight for survival, for the chance to prove humanity's worth. But now something else was happening. This was bigger than just one fight. The entire arena, the galaxy itself, seemed to be shifting beneath his feet. The alien addressed Marcus directly now, its voice softer, almost respectful. "You have done what no one thought possible. You have proven the strength of your kind. You have earned your place among the stars." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He had always known that humanity had potential, but to hear it from someone like this, it was almost too much to take in. Before he could respond, the alien turned to the crowd once more. "Let it be known," it said, "that the defeat of the Queen is not the end. It is the beginning of something new. The time has come for the Tsarak to evolve, and the humans, they will have a voice in this galaxy." The words seemed to linger in the air, resonating with the spectators. Some nodded in agreement, while others seemed reluctant, but none dared to argue. The alien's power was undeniable, and the crowd, though wary, accepted what had been said. Marcus couldn't believe it. He had just survived an impossible battle, and now the galaxy was watching. His victory had become something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The Tsarak, once untouchable, now had to face the reality of their defeat. And humanity, a species once thought weak, had just been elevated to something more. As the alien began to speak once more, Marcus allowed himself to relax, if only for a moment. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, he felt like he might have a future where humanity's place among the stars wasn't just a dream, but a reality. The alien turned toward him again, a faint, knowing smile on its face. "You've done more than win a battle, Marcus. You've sparked a revolution." And with that, the arena erupted into a strange mix of applause and murmurs. Marcus had no idea what was coming next, but he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same again. The days following Marcus's victory were a blur. At first, he had expected everything to return to normal after the battle in the arena. He, D1. The Queen had fallen. He should have been able to slip away, to leave the crowd behind and find a quiet corner where he could recover, perhaps reflect on what had just happened. But instead, he found himself thrust into the heart of something much larger than he had ever anticipated. The arena had been left in chaos after the fight. The crowd, still shaken by the impossible events, began to disperse, but whispers of the humans' victory spread like wildfire across the galaxy. No one had expected such an outcome, and now no one could ignore it. The Tsarak, once a race feared and respected by all, had been humbled, their legendary queen defeated in front of an audience that spanned countless systems. Marcus couldn't escape the eyes of those around him. Everywhere he went, there were murmurs. He could hear them even in the hallways and the corridors of the massive arena complex. The Tsarak soldiers, the alien dignitaries, even the slaves, they all looked at him differently now. It wasn't disdain, as he'd expected. It wasn't fear either. It was respect. A respect he hadn't earned by sheer strength, but by something more fundamental. He had earned their respect because he had proven that humans were more than just a species to be overlooked. But the consequences of his victory were only beginning to unfold. It wasn't long before he was summoned to the council chambers. They were lavish, decorated with trophies and symbols of power from every corner of the galaxy. The walls shimmered with a strange metallic sheen, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and burning herbs. At the center of the room stood a large, curved table, around which sat the most powerful beings Marcus had ever seen. They were all alien, some humanoid, some not. Their faces were stern, unreadable, but their eyes that had once been filled with arrogance and superiority, now held a flicker of curiosity when they looked at him. He had no idea what he was doing here. He wasn't an ambassador. He was a soldier, a man who had fought and survived against the odds. He wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even sure he understood the first thing about politics or intergalactic diplomacy. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that, whether he liked it or not, Marcus was now a part of something far bigger than himself. One of the figures at the table, a tall, slender alien with translucent skin, spoke first. Its voice was smooth, melodic, almost hypnotic. "You are the human who defeated the Tsarak Queen," it said, its eyes narrowing slightly as it studied him. "Your actions in the arena have changed the course of our history. The Tsarak are no longer the supreme warriors they once were. Their power, their dominance, has been shattered." Marcus swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what to say. He'd never intended for any of this to happen. He had just fought to survive, but he had done more than that. He had sparked something that the galaxy couldn't ignore. "The Tsarak's reign is over," another voice added. This one came from a creature with multiple eyes and an unsettling, jagged appearance. "And with it, the balance of power across the galaxy has shifted. The Tsarak were one of the last species to hold on to the old ways, the old beliefs. You've proven that those beliefs are no longer enough." Marcus didn't understand everything that was happening, but it was becoming clearer that his actions had opened a door, one that he had no idea how to close. He had become a symbol of change, of rebellion against a system that had existed for centuries. The alien with the translucent skin continued. "We have been watching the Tsarak for a long time. Their aggressive nature, their blind pursuit of power, it has been a dangerous influence on the galaxy. But you, Marcus, have shown us another path. A path we didn't believe was possible for a species so young. You've shown us that humanity has the potential to change the course of history." Marcus couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed. He was just one man. How could he, just one human, have the power to change anything, let alone the entire balance of galactic politics? The creature with the multiple eyes spoke again. "Your victory was not just a battle. It was a declaration. It was a message to every species that the old ways are dying. The Tsarak have lost their dominance. But the galaxy is not without order. We need new leadership, new power, new vision." Marcus felt a weight settling on his shoulders. He didn't want this responsibility. He didn't want to be part of some galactic power struggle. He just wanted to go home. But that was no longer an option. He had seen it in their eyes. These beings weren't here to ask for his opinion. They were here to make him a part of their plan, whether he liked it or not. "The galaxy needs a new force," the translucent-skinned alien continued. "A force that can challenge the old powers, that can bring about the changes necessary to ensure survival in the coming era. Humanity is that force. And you, Marcus, have proven that you are the one to lead it." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Marcus's heart sank. He was no leader. He was a fighter, a survivor. He had never asked for this. He had never wanted this. But the alien voices around him were insistent. "We are offering you a chance to shape the future, to lead humanity into a new era, the creature with multiple eyes said. The Tsarak are no longer a threat, but there are others. Others who would seek to fill the power vacuum left by their fall. We need someone who understands the value of survival, who understands the true cost of power. Marcus was silent for a moment, trying to process everything. He had been thrust into this situation by nothing more than his own instincts and will to survive. But now he was being asked to lead a movement, a revolution perhaps. "What are you asking me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The alien with the translucent skin smiled, though the expression seemed almost sad. "We are asking you to lead humanity into the next stage of its evolution, to become the force that reshapes this galaxy." Marcus's mind raced. He had fought for his life in the arena, but this was something entirely different. He wasn't ready for this, but he could see it in their eyes. They weren't asking, they were demanding. "We can offer you power," the translucent-skinned alien said, its voice like velvet. "We can offer you the resources to build something greater than any of the ancient empires. But you must choose. Will you take this opportunity, or will you walk away and let the galaxy return to the chaos it has known for eons?" Marcus's pulse quickened as he looked around the room at the eyes staring back at him. He knew what they were offering. It was not just power, it was the chance to reshape everything. To forge a new path for humanity. He could feel the weight of the decision settling on his chest. Whatever he chose now would affect not just his life, but the future of humanity itself. He had survived the arena, he had survived the Tsarak, but this was something he wasn't sure he could survive. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "I'll lead." The room fell silent for a moment, and then the alien with the translucent skin nodded, its eyes gleaming with approval. "You've made the right choice, Marcus. The galaxy will never be the same." As the council members exchanged glances, Marcus felt the enormity of his decision. He had just agreed to lead a revolution. He had agreed to change the galaxy. And though he wasn't sure what that meant for him or for humanity, he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. The days after Marcus's decision to lead were unlike anything he had ever experienced. The gravity of his choice weighed on him more with each passing hour. He had gone from a soldier in a desperate fight for survival to the leader of a revolution, the figurehead of a movement that would change the course of history. It was hard to grasp, harder still to believe. And yet here he was, standing at the center of a vast and complex galaxy, one that seemed to be shifting around him, pulling him into its currents whether he was ready or not. The council had granted him a place among them, offering him a seat at the table. It wasn't just ceremonial. The power they wielded was real, and they were serious about giving him a role in the coming changes. As the weeks went by, Marcus spent hours in meetings, discussing strategies, resources, alliances, and threats. He was being trained in the ways of politics, diplomacy, and leadership, things he had never imagined he would need to know. The once simple, survival-oriented human now found himself thrust into the corridors of power, surrounded by beings far older and more powerful than he. His first few attempts at speaking to the council were awkward. He was used to fighting, not leading discussions, not weighing the moral and strategic implications of every word he said. But with each session, he grew more confident, more aware of the influence he had. He knew deep down that this was bigger than him. This was about the future of humanity, about ensuring that their place in the galaxy was no longer in doubt. But there was also a darker side to all of this, a side he couldn't ignore. The more power he gained, the more enemies he attracted. It was inevitable. There were those who didn't want the old order to fall. The Tsarak were not the only ones who had controlled the balance of power for so long. There were factions, old alliances, and secretive empires that would stop at nothing to maintain the status quo. Marcus's rise had disturbed the delicate equilibrium of the galaxy, and he knew that not all the forces around him were allies, no matter how friendly they seemed. One evening, after a long meeting with the council, Marcus found himself walking alone through the grand hallways of the complex. The walls, made of polished stone, seemed to glow faintly under the dim light, casting shadows that made the place feel ancient and alive. It was a far cry from the dirty, chaotic arena where he had fought just weeks ago. Now, the halls were filled with echoes of diplomacy, of power plays, of decisions that would determine the fate of entire species. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He had grown used to the attention, to the eyes that followed him wherever he went, but tonight it felt different. A coldness lingered in the air, and the shadows seemed darker, deeper. Marcus had learned to trust his instincts, and tonight they were screaming at him. He paused in front of a large, intricately carved door. This room, he knew, was where the most sensitive matters were discussed, where the true power of the galaxy lay, where decisions were made that affected not just nations, but the very fabric of existence. He was about to turn away when he heard a voice. Marcus. He turned, startled to see an alien figure standing in the shadows. It was a creature he had seen before, one of the council members, but this one was different. There was something about the way it moved, too fluid, too controlled. It was the alien with the multiple eyes, the one who had spoken most insistently during his initiation into the council's plans. "Do you have a moment?" the alien asked, its voice low, almost soothing. Marcus hesitated but nodded. There was no harm in a conversation, especially with someone so close to the heart of the council. He had learned not to trust anyone completely, but he had also learned the value of alliances, of keeping his enemies close. The alien gestured toward a nearby balcony. "I wanted to speak with you, alone." They walked in silence, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the otherwise quiet hallway. The balcony overlooked a vast expanse, a shimmering view of distant stars and nebulae that stretched out forever. It was beautiful in a way that made Marcus feel small, insignificant even, against the backdrop of the universe. "Everything is changing, isn't it?" the alien asked, gazing out at the stars. "The Tsarak have fallen, the old order is crumbling. It's only a matter of time before new powers rise to take their place." Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned against the railing, looking out at the stars. "And you think we're the ones who should fill that void?" The alien's eyes glinted, its many irises narrowing slightly. "You may be more than just a symbol, Marcus. You have the potential to lead humanity to greatness, but not everyone believes in the new path. Some still cling to the old ways." Marcus frowned. He could feel the weight of the alien's words, but he wasn't sure he understood what it was really getting at. The alien stepped closer, its voice dropping to a near whisper. "There are those among us who would see you fail, who would rather see the galaxy stay in the hands of the powerful few, and there are others who want you to succeed, but not at the cost of their own power." Marcus's pulse quickened. He had suspected this, but hearing it aloud made the reality much clearer. "And where do you stand?" he asked, meeting the alien's gaze. "I stand with what's best for the galaxy," it replied, its eyes unreadable. "But sometimes that means making hard choices. It means understanding that not everyone will get what they want, even if it's for the greater good." Marcus felt the weight of the decision he was facing. He was being pulled in so many different directions. Some wanted him to be the leader of a new order, while others wanted to control him, use him as a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. The alien took a step back, its tone softening. "Just remember, Marcus, power is not always what it seems. It's a game of balance. And when the time comes, you'll have to decide which side you're on." The words lingered in the air long after the alien had left, and Marcus was left alone with his thoughts. The stars above seemed distant, cold, as though they were watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. His place in the galaxy was no longer just about survival. It was about choosing the right path, the right side to stand on. And for the first time since he had fought in the arena, Marcus wasn't sure where that path would lead him. The council had given him power, and the galaxy had given him a voice. But with that power came responsibility. And with that responsibility came enemies, dangers, and choices that would define not only his future, but the future of humanity itself. As Marcus stood on the balcony, looking out at the endless expanse, he knew one thing for sure: the fight was far from over. It had only just begun.